Good afternoon, everyone. I'm thrilled to welcome you all to our webinar, Multiplying Salesforce, Bringing Trailblazers Together, brought to you by MX's partners in collaboration with Centelon. I'm your host, Lopa. So first of all, I thank all of you for taking time off your busy schedule to be with us. We promise to make it worth your while and hope to make this 1 hour of enriching experience. So just an etiquette tip before I start. If you have any query or facing any issues during the session, please drop us a message in the chat room and I'll work with my team to resolve it as soon as possible. Today's agenda starts with a very brief introduction of our two organizers of this webinar. After the quick intros, we will then move on to the panel discussion, followed by the question and answer session in the end. Let me start with my company, MX's. I will share my screen in a moment. So this is my company, MX's partners. Many of you who have responded to the survey would be knowing my name because I have been reaching out to all of you. So we are like a go-to-market services company who helps technology companies for both products and services. We help companies who do not have US offices to kind of set up their marketing strategy, do entire go-to-market plan, starting with market research, and then we help them launch products and services, as well as do promotion campaigns and the end cycle, as well as of sales execution, starting from lead generation to contract sign up. So MX's Partners is headquartered out of Princeton, New Jersey. That is where I am based out from. Started by Mr. Shrikant Srinivasan in Feb 2019. So most of our clientele is actually from India, Australia, Latin America, and a few from Europe. So we mostly handle companies who have something, something like cutting edge and new technologies and who are in the current trend in terms of both IT products and services. So that is what we have been doing for this past almost 2 years now, though COVID struck in between. But it has been a very exciting journey. And so we are very, very happy to, co-host this webinar along with Centelon. I would now welcome Manoj Marathe. He's actually joining us, from Centelon to introduce us to our sponsor. So I'll just welcome Manoj.
Thank you, Lopa. Hello all to all the panelists, attendees, and fellow Trailblazers. Good afternoon. Happy to introduce Centelon. Centelon was founded in 2016. We are a business solutions provider. We are a trusted technology partner to many organizations across the industry verticals. We are a Salesforce consulting partner since our inception. We have been helping the customers in their digital transformation journey by leveraging the full potential of the Salesforce platform. We are a family of over 300 consultants spread across Australia, India, Singapore, and United States. We provide the entire gamut of Salesforce services, from CRM strategy to managed services. We have successfully delivered multiple Salesforce implementations across organizations, covering complex data migrations to the business integrations. We provide round-the-clock support to our valued customers across the globe using our tailored managed services called CAP for Salesforce. This helps our customers to stay on top of the continuously evolving Salesforce ecosystem. We are also an ISV partner with dedicated Salesforce experts working on innovative solutions. Our team has launched several app exchange solutions and accelerators. I'm excited to be part of this engaging discussions on the Salesforce survey report from MX's. Thank you. Lopa, over to you.
Thank you so much, Manoj. It was good to know about Centelon. So now it's time actually to start our panel discussion. Before I welcome the panelists, let me give you a very brief background, like why did we actually run this survey? Now, I think as you all know, we are associated with Salesforce. We can actually call it as the #1 CRM who has taken the world by storm. So at MX's, when we were starting this interesting journey of global growth, we were actually taken aback by the current trends in the Salesforce market, especially in US, Though both demand and supply of Salesforce services and resources seem to be on a gallop, on a very fast run, but still there was a gap. There was this high demand has also led to a churn on the workforce environment, but still there were a lot of unmet needs both from the supply and the demand side. And this led us to launch this formal survey on Salesforce users a couple of months back. I personally spoke to many of the respondents and was actually impressed by the deep insights that we gathered from there. We were really overwhelmed by the response we received, both in terms of volume as well as the variety of topics that the Salesforce community actually highlighted during the survey. So that is where we actually thought, we would run this webinar to discuss the survey results. And now, with further ado, here we are. Let us welcome our panelists for the afternoon to discuss some of the survey topics that we have come up with today. I actually wanted to do this in alphabetical order, but even then enabled me to happily introduce our only female panelist for today, Chassidy Hall, as the first. Let me tell you a little bit about her. A certified Salesforce and Marketing Cloud Administrator, Chassidy has been an active Salesforce user in the higher education industry for the last 15 years. Currently, she is a Salesforce administrator for a company that is the leading provider of data service, research, strategic enrollment, and marketing services to colleges and universities across the country. University of Phoenix alumnus with an MBA and a Master of Arts in Adult Education. She has a passion for learning and helping others gain access to education. Let's please welcome Chassidy Hall. So next, I would like to introduce John Clemenhag, Salesforce Administrator, Blue Cross, North Carolina. John has been working in corporate IT for 25 years, the last 10 years as a Salesforce administrator in the healthcare space. He has been the sole admin of a 100-user organization and part of Johnson & Johnson's Enterprise Center of Excellence with 80 organizations and 10,000 plus users. He has a degree in music from Bowling Green State University and SUNY Brockport, a certified Salesforce administrator who has attended Dreamforce 5 times. Welcome, John, to the panel.
Thank you, Lopa. Glad to be here.
Yes. Finally, our third panelist, Josiah Solly, Salesforce Administrator and Developer of Crucial Care. Josiah has spent 6 years in IT profession as an IT professional, 3 of which has been spent working with Salesforce. He started software development as a hobby and worked for 2 years for the state of Florida as a web developer. Soon, Josiah started his Salesforce journey that has brought him now to Crucial Care as a Salesforce administrator and developer. Entirely self-taught, Josiah's drive for self-improvement and knowledge has led him to many opportunities, including dabbling in mechanical and electrical engineering. Glad to welcome you, Josiah.
Hi, thank you. Glad to be here.
So I'm sure that all of you agree that we have a great panel of 3 professionals with diverse experience who will be able to provide us different perspectives. So a quick reminder again to our attendees to type in all their questions in the chat box, mention the name of the panelists whom they would like to hear from, and we would address that at the end of the panel discussion. So hello panel members, again, let me first give you a snapshot on the survey findings. We do not have time to pick up the entire survey, but we took a sample list of questions, post which we can start the panel discussion. I'll just share my screen and take you to the snapshot of the survey findings. So first, I thought I'd just give you a quick overview of the kind of people who actually responded to our survey. So if you look here, of course, a little less than 60% of our participants were actually Salesforce users who have been using Salesforce for longer than 5 years. Then little less than 40% have been using Salesforce for 1 to 5 years, and less than a year is actually less than 10%. And this group of people are actually right from Salesforce administrator to director level. We had an entire, it was an open survey with no, limitation on any particular industry. So we wanted a generic view, so we kind of covered all industries. So this comes across all industries. We didn't have any specific industry actually dominating the responses. This I thought was also important in terms of, usage of Salesforce licenses. Are people using what they are paying for? Yeah, a small percentage did tell us they didn't know. Maybe they were not the decision makers. But if you look at this, yeah, the no is also like, it's little less than 50%, but it's pretty, high. And here, yes is of course expected, right? We would want that yes to be 100%, but the no is you can't ignore the no. So I thought actually I will show this also. If it comes in our discussion, maybe we can pick this up. Then another thing that we thought was important while designing the survey was the majority of cost associated with Salesforce. So this was another question we had, where yes, it didn't surprise us when everyone said that licenses seems to be the most expensive one. But then, yeah, delivering new enhancements and ongoing maintenance seemed to take over. That the others that were there became insignificant because of the way people actually selected these three. And this whole thing is now reflected in the last question, which I'm putting up. And with that, we can launch our panel discussion. So this was something which asked everyone, what are the challenges you are facing with Salesforce? And you'd see there the top one is user adoption related issues, which came out as the top. But if you see the top 5, they all are in a way almost aligned, right? It's not that they are all sticking out. That is why we could not, usually people do first 3 or something. So we kind of took this all 5, and because ongoing maintenance and delivering new enhancements are like a match, we clubbed them together as joint third. Conflicting priorities from business units actually came in as second. So these are the top 5 points actually, which we will discuss today in the panel discussion. So the first one is user adoption related issues, which comes in as the first challenge here. The second one is actually conflicting priorities from business units. The third one, joint third, ongoing maintenance and delivering new enhancements. They have come as joint third. And the last one is they've not got full value from Salesforce implementations. So though these are top 5, one being joint, we have actually 4 points. And with this, I'll just stop sharing my screen and we will now start the panel discussion. So first, I would like to come to you, Chassidy. Like, do you agree that the top 2 issues, user adoption issues and conflicting priorities from different business units, are they really the highest concerns for the Salesforce team in an organization?
Yes, I do think that user adoption and conflicting business priorities from different business units are the top 2 issues of any organization using Salesforce. I would agree that all 4 of them were equally matched, just like your findings. I'm not surprised. I feel like user adoption typically boils down to an organization's ability to budget for training. And typically training is one of the first areas to suffer from budget cuts or reallocation of funds. So unfortunately, user adoption does tend to get lumped in there with training, and it goes kind of off the wayside. I also do think sometimes organizations don't give themselves enough credit, and because they might not know what like-minded companies are doing, they might think that they don't have good user adoption, but all the while they really are using their org and their users are using it. So making sure you remind your users and an organization that they're doing a good job using the system is also very helpful, because Salesforce is such a open system and everybody uses it differently. I feel like conflicting business priorities in an organization also tie into user adoption or lack of training. The business priorities might not be conflicting, it's just the organization might not have the ability to show or even shift business priorities to be more aligned or paint a bigger picture for different business units. I do feel that if you painted a bigger picture, it could help align these different business units to be more cohesive in understanding what the system could do for them.
Thank you, Chassidy. John, would you like to add into what Chassidy said?
Sure. Chassidy mentioned that it's difficult to understand how the platform is actually being used. And this is certainly a challenge that I have faced, that gathering analytics about how the platform is being used is very difficult. With Salesforce release of, I forget the package that they call it, but it includes, you could add to your Salesforce license and get more data that they have, but they don't make readily available. But still, it's quite an analytical journey to determine what the platform is actually being used for. And I have been in a couple situations where leadership has come to us and said, you know, who's using it? What are they doing there? How can we improve this? And we have been really challenged to get some numbers around that. So anecdotal stories are really the best way, I think, just polling your users. And that's one of the benefits of having an administrator that's kind of embedded with the business, is they have a real sense for who's using the platform and what they're using it for. On top of that, metrics about what you hope to accomplish from the platform are often very poorly communicated from the business. So getting that up front from your leadership about, you know, why are we implementing this and what do we hope to accomplish from it, and perhaps building some features so that you can capture those kind of metrics and report on them, will go a long ways in understanding, you know, what's working and what's not, and how you can improve user adoption. Similarly, for business priorities, every organization I've been involved in has had a mountain of demand, and how we prioritize that demand has been extremely challenging. And from my point of view, this needs to come from senior management. And you run into a challenge where your Salesforce team has to say no to people, and you get seen as obstructionist or maybe playing favorites. But if you can put some real kind of numbers around increased revenue or decreased cost and tie them to, you know, annual goals that are provided by senior management, it makes it much easier to communicate to your business partners where, you know, we understand you would like to have this, but it doesn't provide value to the company. So we have to focus on this other thing that is going to provide value to the company. And that it makes for a much better working relationship with your business partners. And more often than not, when you get down to that, the complete acceptance from the business partners, as long as you put them on the roadmap and say, you know, we're going to get to this, but these other things are a higher priority because of these key deliverables that upper management has tasked us with, people are fine with that. They don't feel like they're neglected, and will be willing to wait for their spot on the roadmap.
Okay. Thank you, John. Josiah, how do you think of tackling these issues? Because for me, they are in a way not related to a Salesforce system or a feature or something like that, right? Both these two issues are actually in a way outside the Salesforce system per se. So I think it's more of a culture or a behavioral trait of the people in the organization. And you as a technical Salesforce person, how do you even tackle both these two issues? Would you be able to tell us something about that, Josiah?
Yes, well, I think to be honest, I think that it's not safe to say that this is not necessarily a Salesforce issue, because to some degree it is. Definitely to some degree there is a lot of people out there that they don't necessarily have the training, or they don't have the, as Chassidy brought up, and then of course John making a very good point with metrics and individuals actually using it and whatnot. But I think that one of the things that I've ran across quite a few times, I know I've had conversations with people where, they might ask me like, what do you do for a living? And I say, I'm a Salesforce admin. And one of the things that I hear the most of anything is, I hate that platform. It's, people saying, I can't stand that platform. And of course, in my limited time that I've been working with the platform, I've been involved with quite a few companies and whatnot. In my experience, I believe a lot of that discontent, which I honestly think we'll touch on later on, a lot of that discontent, I believe, comes from not really utilizing the platform to what it's good for, not really setting it up correctly. I've been in so many situations where things are more complicated than they need to be, or things just don't work simply because somebody came before the team that's there. They set something up that just kind of worked for the time. And as a result, we're here 3, 4, 5 years later, and people are not happy with the system because it doesn't work. And so I do feel like there is quite a bit of that, that there is quite a bit of discontent for the system, simply because in my experience, many companies don't have it implemented correctly from the beginning. And of course, the thing about trust, with trust, it's easy to lose and it's hard to get. So when people come into your system and it's, not set up necessarily the way it needs to be, or there are issues with it from the beginning, they quickly lose that trust. And then at that point, your entire team is just struggling to catch up on that, struggling to make up that trust. And I believe that's one of the biggest issues with user adoption.
Agreed. Very good point.
Both John and Chassidy are nodding their heads, and I see Manoj nodding his head. Manoj, would you like to share something on these two issues as well from your side? I'm sure you must have faced them.
Yeah, certainly. I think, I echo all the points, which all the panelists have, mentioned, and especially one which Josiah mentioned about the implementations part of it. Many times I've seen that, the users are not onboarded throughout the journey of the implementation itself, right? So it shouldn't happen that you're implementing a system or a Salesforce without them getting involved in that journey, right? So right from day one, in terms of, as probably John rightly mentioned, why we are actually doing this transformation, right? What are you going to get benefits out of it? And getting them engaged right from day one, and letting them know the benefits that they will get, whether it's user experience, whether it's automation, whether it's customer experience, whatever it is. But you have to articulate that clearly so that they should be excited to start using the system the day it goes live, rather than, okay. And again, to again go back to the Chassidy's point, that if their trainings are not effective, and so they don't know, they have a weapon, but they don't know how to use it, right? So it's of no use then, and that's where the user adoption starts crashing. And the other thing, which again, probably I'll go back to John's point, that around the conflicting business priorities, those have to be managed by the management itself. When, let's say, because many a times I've seen Salesforce admins, maybe there'll be 1 or 2 for the small organizations, and there are 10 different business units who wants to, deliver a feature. Now, there's clearly a bottleneck in terms of the capacity that you have to roll out those new features. Then the question comes, which feature should go first, or which enhancement should go first in production? What's the value of delivering that? Is it going to improve your NPS, or is it going to reduce your cost of X operation? So that has to be clearly articulated against each feature that is raised either in your ticketing system or Jira, and then accordingly that has to be prioritized. So every business unit should understand, yeah, there is a process to it, and I have to justify why I need this feature now, and accordingly, that needs to be prioritized.
Thank you, Manoj. So John, I'd come back to you, and I'd like to know your view on the third challenge, rather third, and like they have come up as together, the ongoing maintenance part and the delivering of new enhancements. I really thought, that these would actually top the list while designing the survey, but I was wrong. They have come as actually joint third here. So would you like to tell us, your views or your experience regarding both of these, ongoing maintenance of Salesforce and delivering new enhancements?
Sure. Well, there's several aspects to ongoing maintenance. The top one has to be just Salesforce releases. 3 times a year, there is a whole new bundle of features that have to be sifted through to see if there's any impact to your system or any value to your system. There might be something that you might want to implement that's coming out, and that's time consuming. The second thing is tech debt. Code builds up, it may no longer be in use, it may not be the best written code, and so it needs to be reviewed and either deleted or enhanced. Then there's managed package updates, which if you're, it's hard not to use a managed package. I love them, but very often, they'll put out an update outside of the Salesforce release cycles, so that takes some time. There's sandbox maintenance as well. You can spin up a bunch of sandboxes, and it's not really a problem, but it's probably something that should be addressed, particularly if they're out of date. Do they need to be refreshed or deleted? Takes time. Data cleansing is also something that needs to be done on a regular basis. It's really hard to keep data clean. And along those lines, archiving as well, because things can just pile up. And if you don't archive it, then you can start running into performance issues. So all these things don't directly return value to the company. So it's very difficult to schedule them in your sprints if you're using Agile or just your daily workload. It's hard to convince management that it's worth you spending time on. So this is something that you just have to fight the good fight and make the case for it. And I have a partner here where I'm currently working, where he likes to dedicate 10% of every sprint to tech debt, so that we have that on our radar and we just don't let it go forever. And then suddenly we're against a monumental task when we could have chipped away at it. As far as delivering new enhancements goes, it depends on your scale. I have been at companies that has had multiple third-party developers working on the same org at the same time. So managing that and managing conflicts that come from that, and keeping those third parties on track with the company standards, not only code, but everything from description of fields or help text or things like that, can take quite a bit of resource to keep track of all that and manage all the other resources that are involved in that software development lifecycle, the biggest of which being testing, which is a key element. You could really dedicate a lot of time to testing, not only of new features and enhancements that have been built to make sure that they meet user acceptance criteria, but also regression testing to make sure that stuff that you're adding is not breaking existing stuff. And that's very difficult to do. If you can start building scripts that can be leveraged for regression testing, you're going to have one, step ahead of the pack, because if something's being added and you don't have test scripts to regression test, it very often it comes to light at the very end of the process, and they've got a go live date already on the calendar, and you don't have regression testing done, so you just kind of don't do it and regression test by fire, and whatever breaks in production you have to go back and fix, and that's not a good user experience going back to user adoption. So that's why regression testing is a real key. But again, it takes a lot of resources, and that represents a cost, and making that case for that cost can be very difficult. I've also been at some, larger organizations, depending on your experience, where automated testing has been something that has been implemented. And this is really costly to get up and running. It takes a lot of resources, but it is a tremendous benefit. There are several tools out there to do automated testing. And if it's something that you can afford, not only from an initial license cost, but from a resource cost to initially develop the scripts, it has a lot of value in the long run to test everything thoroughly before it goes to production.
Right. It's really valuable, John. So for me, actually, though both issues have come in together, I keep thinking they are actually very different issues, right? Like the ongoing maintenance is kind of daily activities that you do, where ad hoc issues also which might come, and you in a way you're prepared for it and you do it. And the delivering of new enhancement actually requires like a proper project plan with planned activities and all. So Chassidy, I would like to hear from you. How do you even I do not know if all organizations can afford two very different teams working on those two things, right? You practically work with the same team and you juggle with the resources to achieve what is priority, which is priority, right? So if you could tell me something about how do you even do that? You juggle, or how do you balance those two activities?
Well, it's a good question. And John gave a really good example of all of the things that do need to be done, and the not to boot with everything doing the new enhancements. Depending on the size of your organization, there are some organizations that are big enough to have enough Salesforce admins or a team of people, and you can dedicate specific humans to ongoing maintenance and for process improvements. So divide and conquer. If you don't have that, if you're not that big, which many organizations are not that big, many organizations don't even have a dedicated admin, which is probably one of the more detrimental things that can happen for a company using Salesforce. But if you have a small 1 or 2 person shop, it's very important just to make sure you're allocating the right time or resources. Like John said, even if it's 10% to tech debt, they've got it on their plan. It's something that they're thinking about all the time. So you're at least not identifying all of the things that you need to do and putting them into buckets is huge. As far as planning the ongoing, you have to personally putting everything in buckets of 3 always helps me. Like what's necessary, like your big rocks, your medium rocks, and your little rocks. So you can plan according, as long as you have a system that keeps you in place. I'm lucky enough to be where I'm at, where I have a very organized leader, and we're trying to set up shop in a very methodical and intentional way. But I came from an organization that was an ISV partner, and we were a managed package, and I worked directly with all of our client admins, or the people who got forced to be the admins of Salesforce. And just the 3 upgrades we did a year, and as a company, we tried to align those upgrades with the Salesforce schedule, so everybody was thinking about the same thing at the same time. But watching the amount of work that they had to do, and these were non-technical people, to keep their system up to date was, it was hard to watch them do it and not be able to help in the way that I know I could have. But as far as adopting improvements, process improvements, better utilizing your org, I think probably one of the key components of doing that successfully is making sure you identify your key stakeholders. So John, and I believe Josiah mentioned this too, getting the senior management team on board is huge, but I think one of the group of people that often get missed are your super users or the people who have the biggest voice, right? So your senior leadership, obviously they have the biggest voice, but you've got the unintended big voice people, and they're the people who can drive the senior leaders from the marketing department or the IT department or security. And you've got to find your biggest influencers, the people who will be your cheerleaders, which again, I also think that this ties down to user adoption. If you've got your key stakeholders knowing what you're doing and why you're doing it and how you're going to make their job easier, whatever that is, whether it makes their day-to-day easier, whether you're making your clients happier, whether you're making your system more organized, if you get your key stakeholders involved and show them a plan, a metric plan, like this is what we want to do, this is what will impact, and these are the results that we'll get, right? What are you going to do? How are you going to do it? What is the outcome? And you let them help deliver that message and show them. And with things like sandboxes, you can quickly put something together and show them. And that's kind of, it's not trickery, but it's definitely something I use. Like, look at this pretty thing that we can do for you. Don't you want it? It's right here. It's very easy to do. These are the things that are going to hold it back. Help me prevent those things from holding it back. I think that's probably, and again, I could talk for hours about it, but I think it boils down to user adoption at the core, whether that is day-to-day use of the tool or day-to-day understanding of the tool, how it's working, how it's impacting, and then making sure you get all of the right people on in your team and understanding the business and that you're here to help them.
Thank you, Chassidy. Manoj, would you add something? I'm sure you come across such kind of requests from clients too, right? How do you balance ongoing maintenance plus enhancements, which might even interfere with each other, right, as you are doing those activities?
Yeah, certainly. And I think it's not straightforward, to very honestly speaking. And so what we did is after analyzing, the lot of projects and working with the customers, we came up with our own framework called CAP. And we say that, you have to wear this cap when managing the Salesforce environment. But what does CAP means? So CAP is CAPP. So C is for corrective maintenance, A is adaptive maintenance, P is preventive, and the other P, last P, is a perfective maintenance. And I think some of the aspects probably John and Chassidy already covered. So corrective is nothing but bug fixes. If there are any existing bugs, whether it's a major, minor, and you have to go ahead and fix those, because those are irritants for the users, and just want to make sure that we are getting rid of that. The A is adaptive. So as John mentioned, Salesforce is actually releasing the new releases every year, and there are also patches being released not only from Salesforce but from your app exchange providers. You have to keep on adapting. At the same time, you have to adapt to the business changes which are happening continuously. Tomorrow, business wants to release a new product in the market, or there's a new marketing campaign that you want to launch. So you have to adapt, keep on adapting, those kind of changes on your Salesforce. And again, that has to go through again the kind of prioritization. The third is the P, that is a preventive maintenance. How can I continuously monitor and proactively address any potential issues, whether it's you are reaching to your API limits, or whether you're configured permissions incorrectly and that needs to be fixed up. Whether you want to monitor your backups continuously and archival jobs are running or not. So those are all kind of a preventive, maintenance activities. So Salesforce Optimizer could be a handy tool for that, because it, gives you a kind of a report, in terms of, your security issues or potential MFA is not activated for any particular users and those set of things. The last is a perfective maintenance, and that's probably what John was highlighting around, the technology debt. So it's a journey towards a perfection, right? So it's a continuous improvement. So addressing any technical debts, even looking at the debug logs for, potential errors or, the warning messages, and addressing those on an ongoing basis. So there are these 4 dimensions, and if you miss any of these dimensions, then, your Salesforce environment is going to get into mess. And then, as probably John mentioned, better to do a regression than regretting. So I'll call that way. So I agree that, and it's very tough task for admins many a times, because many of the times their bandwidth goes into password resets, changing profile permissions and all. So, and unfortunately, that there are not many tools out there in the market, okay, which can actually automate some of these jobs for the admins. So we launched the product called Axilla Virtual Assistant. So because if anytime you have to create a new user in the system, you have to go to the setup, to click on user. So there are so many page navigations you have to do just to create a user, or just to change the permission, or even to reset the password. So we thought of, just to make the life easy for the admins, why don't we create a tool? And that was one of the accelerators that we developed. But I can, correlate, whatever John and Chassidy said so far in terms of, the hassles that every admin goes through.
Thank you, Manoj. Let us now come to the next challenge, which was in the top 4. I was actually very surprised to see this being stated by, survey respondents, especially when a few I spoke to, saying that they work so hard, sometimes the management is also very tough on them, but they keep feeling that they are not getting full value from Salesforce implementations, though the organization is spending money. So, Zushaya, how would you like to address that? Do you really agree that on this common thread, the people at the end are still feeling they do not get full value of the Salesforce implementations? And these are not users, right? These are the guys who are running Salesforce for the organizations.
Yeah, I would say from my experience, it does depend on where you go. Some companies, I imagine I've at least been part of one company, right, at the very least, where it really did feel like we were getting value out of it. But it really does depend on where you go. I think this kind of ties back to the point that I was making before about adoption, because again, when you come into a system that has a lot of tech debt, that has where you feel like you're trying to play that catch-up game, a little, like you're really trying to catch up on all that tech debt and whatnot, that's where you can start to feel like you're losing value, or that there's not a whole lot of value there. And that just comes down to making sure from day one that things are being set up correctly. Like I literally had a company that I worked for that they had their systems were running so slow because they had something like 42 they had 42 processes for their case object alone, and that is incredible. Like, that is so far from what you should have. And of course, in an environment like that, it's hard not to look at that and go, we're not getting value out of this, because we're wasting a lot of time on just saving a record. That is, and then of course, because you're spending so much time trying to catch up on, okay, now we have to sift through 42 of these processes. We have to figure out which ones of them are still even doing anything, because a lot of them we're not doing anything at all. And then we have to figure out how we're going to consolidate this to a way that's meaningful and that is efficient and whatnot. And that's putting all that time into that tech debt, where that time could be used for, more implementation of things that the business needs as a whole. So I definitely, I will say it depends on where you go. Of course, some organizations are actually well put together, and in which case they do actually get plenty of value out of it. And there's there's not talk of we're not getting value out of it at that point. But I think honestly, it all comes down to how it's done from the beginning. Implemented right with best practices. Things like, another big thing is Salesforce is an extremely powerful platform. Like, with no customizations. Like, if you don't even bother putting in your custom Apex code, you don't bother with trying to build or trying to find managed packages. Now, I know John's saying he loves managed packages, but I mean, I'm sorry, I have to kind of be a little bit of a devil's advocate here, because the thing is managed packages are great. They do a lot of stuff, but there's a lot of things that Salesforce can do directly out of the box with zero custom code or anything that, are super beneficial for the org as well. And I think in that regard, there is also, I think that in the market in general, there's too much of a feeling that, hey, we have this thing we need to make, or we have this requirement that we need to meet. So let's build a class to handle this, or let's find an app to handle this. And they don't even realize that 9 times out of 10, you could just do it with the tools that Salesforce has right out of the box. So so that's honestly what I think is going on when it comes to a lot of not getting value is really just improper use or improper implementation, and dealing with the consequences of that, whether that is your team that you're on at the moment, or the team that was on before you, or maybe like the companies that you came into where there wasn't a dedicated Salesforce admin before you came on. Stuff like that can that can hurt that the value that you get out of the platform as a whole.
Thank you, Josiah. John, would you like to add into that?
I would. When I saw this heading, not getting full value, what immediately came to mind is that every company that I've been at, when it came time for our contract renewal with Salesforce, were greeted with great alarm from the people who held the IT budget and the finance people, and every single time. And they wanted to know, why are we paying so much money for this one piece of software? And so making that case for them has been difficult. I don't know about, in general, I would say the people who use it find a lot of value in it. Although I have had the same experience as Josiah, where I mentioned I'm a Salesforce administrator out on the golf course, and almost universally I hate that platform, mostly because it's salespeople and they feel like it's an intrusion into their little world. But also other people have had bad experiences with it, and that predominates. But in general, as far as making the value proposition to finance and the IT budget holder, it's very difficult to quantify productivity gains. And this is something that I've been trying to do, because when I was at Johnson & Johnson, I could not get a project approved unless I had a hard number on increased revenue or decreased cost. I had to have an actual number to get a project approved. And so I worked diligently to put a number on productivity gains, and attended several Dreamforce sessions and local Salesforce administrator user groups, and raised this issue as, how do you get a number on productivity gains? And it's a mystery. No one has a good answer for it. But the end users certainly appreciate the productivity gains. How to explain that to finance, still, open for suggestions on that.
No, even I thought so. Like, how do you even quantify that value, right? Everything need not be a dollar value. The time saved usually, especially for, say, the sales team or the team who aggressively uses Salesforce. Yes, their sales figures will bring in dollar, but the time spent in kind of having the data at one place, and the part that it's going to be a central repository kind of a thing. I think those kind of values, maybe by the non-say finance or the control teams, it is difficult to put a dollar value to that, right? That is what I think.
There is.
So. Yeah.
Finance usually wants to hear headcount reduction. And I don't want to reduce headcount, so I rarely supply that as a justification for the cost. But one thing I would like to point out is that we've gotten in the habit where I'm currently at of pointing out that the license cost for Salesforce is a one-time cost. And if we're only using it for a limited number of functions, then the cost per function ratio is very high. But if we use Salesforce for more things, the cost per function ratio goes way down. So if they're concerned about the cost of the Salesforce license, the answer is to use Salesforce for more, not to cut it. And so that seems to be getting a lot of traction when we make that argument, and people get it.
Well, if I may chime in here. So honestly, when it comes to that, I would honestly make the argument of show me a CRM that is as flexible, that is as powerful, and can meet all of these business needs. And I mean, show me an alternative, and then you'd realize like the cost at that point. I mean, I hate to say it, but Salesforce kind of has a corner on that market, you know? Like Salesforce in general, it's such a powerful tool, and it really is. And it's so customizable, and it's so flexible that, you know, what is the alternative?
Now, the answer I've gotten is Microsoft Dynamics. I've been in the unenviable position where the companies I've worked at are Microsoft shops, and they want to use Microsoft for everything. I was actually at one company that spent $250,000 to analyze the benefits of using Microsoft Dynamics over Salesforce. And the conclusion of that analysis was that it was similar, that it could do everything that we needed it to do, but it would cost $1 million to migrate our current instance to Microsoft Dynamics. And so that was too heavy of a burden, and it was decided to continue with Salesforce.
Grass is always greener on the other side.
Yep.
No, I'd actually like to address what Josiah, you brought up in terms of an alternative. So I do not remember if the three of you remember that we did have a question there in the end, which was a little like an uncomfortable question saying, would you like to, you know, change from Salesforce? And we are asking this to Salesforce administrators who's, you know, you are earning your livelihood with Salesforce. The results will shock you. Almost 95% said yes.
Wow.
Yes, they all of them said yes. They would want to see something else coming, you know, up with it. Many of them told me, you know, we are not married to this. Like, you know, why not something new, something better, maybe? So we should be open to change. I was surprised by that. Actually, I was really surprised by that.
I think they must have frustrated, you know, justifying the, you know, the cost to the businesses, like what probably John mentioned.
Yeah.
I mean,
no, in fact, we were designing the survey. This question itself was like, what, should we ask it? You know, because this is a very Salesforce-driven question. But we thought, why not? Let people say yes or no. We are not asking for anything else. And the responses are anyway confidential. There is nothing like who is saying what. We are only going by percentages. And that's what this was very surprising, actually.
I mean, I'd be open to a change personally if that change is potentially me sitting on a beach sipping a martini and that making my livelihood that way.
I know why Josiah is saying that. He's in Florida right now.
It's so rainy around here lately.
Oh, okay. So from the challenges point of view, we are done, but we have 2 more minutes, and I just want to address something else, which is personally my question. Actually, I don't see any questions as yet. So maybe I take up the privilege of asking this question. This is something which Manoj, when I discussed with him, he says it's very common, but for me, I'm not a Salesforce administrator who has used Salesforce in that way. I'm just a user, as in a employee kind of a user. What shocked me was like almost little over 60% of our survey respondents said that they have faced issues of multiple Salesforce orgs in one organization. They say the left hand didn't know what the right hand was doing. I mean, I don't even know whom to ask this question to, but that was like the most shocking thing for me, because I thought you buy a system, an organization will get Salesforce to centralize and kind of have everything under control, right? Why would you have unknown 2-3 things going on? One is in the Lightning version, one is in the old classic version. I mean, I was very, very surprised. Josiah was one person I spoke to during the survey, and there were a few more with whom I actually had an in-person discussion during the survey instead of just online submission. So many of those guys, when they told me this, I actually thought, this was very surprising. I leave it open. Who wants to respond to that? This is something personally I want to know. How does it even happen?
I just want to go on the record real quick here and say, yes, I did speak to you about this, but I have not faced this issue. So I'm not the best person to answer. I just want to put that out there.
I have just a very, I don't want to say limited, I have a very cut and dry example. Most of the time, I've worked with Salesforce in higher education for the majority of my career. Typically, if I work in an organization that has more than one org, it's 2 orgs, and it strictly goes to manage admissions versus alumni in an education environment. I've heard of stories of other universities, and typically the alignment is the more money they have, the more orgs they buy. And that also aligns with the fact that they can afford very expensive implementation companies to help implement those orgs. I started my journey in Salesforce in for-profit education, and I would argue that we had the least amount of money to spend, and we did everything in one org. We did faculty contract management, admissions, graduate, undergraduate, we did alumni, everything was in one org. And I think that was more from a budgetary perspective because we were for-profit, so we couldn't spend money. I'm sure John has a lot. Like, I'm curious to see what you've experienced.
Yeah, I have definitely run across this. I mean, I was at Johnson & Johnson. I'm not sure if it's safe to say that, but their experience was they had 80 Salesforce orgs. And that comes from Johnson & Johnson really being a conglomeration of multiple businesses. So each business was semi-autonomous. Johnson & Johnson really was a central services type of organization where finance and IT were provided to these other organizations. Literally, they had to pay for it. They had to use Johnson & Johnson's finance and IT organizations. But at the same time, they had some flexibility to do their own thing. So what happened was a bunch of big hospital groups, came to Johnson & Johnson and said, why do we have to deal with 15 J&J sales reps? Can't there be one person who can represent your whole bag? And Johnson & Johnson decided that made sense, that they wanted to have salespeople to deal with these bigger groups to represent the whole offering from Johnson & Johnson. And so the question became, how do we give them visibility to all the products and the contact points and things like that? And it was decided at Johnson & Johnson at the time that they were going to merge all 80 orgs into one, which was a monumental task. And in order to accomplish that, they came up with a whole scheme of adding postfixes to API names so that they could tell which organization it belonged to. Me personally, I didn't think that made sense. And that's part of the reason why I left Johnson & Johnson. I'm not sure how that project went. There are cross-org connectors that can give visibility to salespeople across multiple orgs. Finance also wants to see a roll-up of numbers from multiple orgs. I was at a company that had separate orgs for different regions of the world. So our Japan office had their own org, and our European office had their own org, and our US office had their own org. And they had slightly different product mixes, and so it made sense to keep them separate. There was really no interaction between the accounts and the opportunities. So that worked there. But our challenge was getting some finance numbers out of those three orgs, particularly along opportunities. I mean, we had our ERP system that was providing final sales, but when it came to forecasting and what was in the pipeline, we had to come up with some ways to merge the data from all three orgs.
Okay.
So currently at Blue Cross, we have 5 orgs, and I think it makes sense. Insurance is a very unusual business in that we have members and providers. We also provide services to different smaller subsets of customers, and so it makes sense to keep those segmented. So I don't, you know, I guess they could be set up. I'm not sure what the issues were that people were reporting to you, but I think it makes sense to have multiple orgs, because particularly now, I mean, when we were first doing the J&J project, there were no cross-org connectors, but now there are. So it is possible to pull data across. So it just keeps it cleaner. You don't, that whole regression testing thing that I was talking about, you don't have to worry about development from, you know, one side of the world impacting current functionality in another side. They're different orgs, and you just don't have to worry about it.
Yeah, I know.
Security too. I mean, makes security so much easier. As soon as you start putting everything in one org, you got all these complex sharing rules, and so it's just easier to keep it separate. Licensing becomes a problem, and J&J actually worked on an agreement with Salesforce where once a quarter we could move licenses from one org to another, because we had a lot of unused licenses in some orgs. But that was a special exception, I gathered, that Salesforce made for us during our contract negotiations. Well, I guess I've kind of gone on a little long on that topic.
That's okay, John. We are good. And actually, Josiah and Chassidy made my work easier. They answered all the questions that were there. Thank you. Thank you so much, because we wouldn't have had time to answer them on live, but thank you so much. I think,
sorry, I just with John sitting there talking, I was like, I gotta do something here. I mean, what does this guy think he's a panelist or something?
No, thank you so much. I appreciate that, because I would have had to advise, say, we would have to email them the responses, but this was good. We answered all of them. So thanks to all three of you, Manoj, you too, in terms of having such a meaningful discussion. I wish we had more time, you know, but still I think we kind of did well. And I think there's a lot to learn in each of our individual journeys. I think all three of you come from 3 very different kind of backgrounds with experience, and that kind of actually helped us get different perspectives. And, you know, so thanks a lot, and we will be in touch with you. And thank you so much for coming to the discussion today. Thank you, panel members. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Bye.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Yeah, thank you.
So attendees, thank you so much for attending the session. If you still have any questions, please feel free to email me. Also, we will get back to you. You will get a copy of the survey report emailed to you at the address that you have provided. And we'll also appreciate the feedback on today's session. So we will be in touch with you regarding that. Thank you so much. Thank you. Bye-bye. Have a good day.
Thank you.